Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Suburban Proletarian. My name is Greg, and today I want to take a second look at a watch that I featured during my Christmas unboxing series a little over a month ago. And I've decided to go with the watch that was by far the most popular from that series. I published the original video on December 26th. It's now President's Day, so about a month and a half later, and it's gotten over 2,000 views. By contrast, I think the video I shot or published most recently before that was of my Zodiac Super Seawolf. It was my 1-year review, follow-up review, and I expected it to be a huge hit, and that's only had 250 views, and it was almost a month earlier than the video about the Orient president. Of course, that's what I'm talking about here. This, as my view count indicates, is an insanely popular watch. There's not a lot of information about it out there. Orient almost seems to be ashamed of the watch. They don't really want to highlight it. It has absolutely no presence on any of Orient's corporate websites, and yet it sells like hotcakes, and they obviously can't afford to ignore it too much. So it's kind of a weird watch, but as you probably saw in the last video, or you probably know already if you're watching this video, it is a blatant homage. I wouldn't want to quite call it a copy, but it comes very close. A very blatant homage to the Rolex day date, which is probably why Orient doesn't really want to show it off too much. But the reason it's been so successful is it's maybe the best copy of a Rolex day date out there. Certainly the most solid, in my opinion. And while Orient may not want to advertise it very much, they think enough of it that they gave it a major upgrade about 4 or 5 years ago. I think it was around 2015. They changed out the old Orient president. And by the way, that's a colloquialism. Again, there's very, very little information about this watch. The name president is just given to it by its fans because it bears such a great resemblance to the Rolex president. But in 2015, Orient actually went ahead and completely revamped the entire watch. They went from folded link Jubilee style bracelet to solid links. They upgraded the fluted bezel ring from chrome plated brass to stainless steel. They went from glass crystal, hardened mineral glass crystal, to sapphire. And probably the most polarizing change that they made, I like it, a lot of people don't, was the change from baton hands, or indices rather, which were gold plated in contrast to the stainless steel case. That was a little bit weird, but people seem to like the old baton indices, and they went to diamond indices. And I'm pretty sure they're not diamonds, but what they are, I don't know. And then they went with a shorter handset to avoid mechanical interference between the sweeping hands and the rather large or thick diamond indices. So now inside the watch is the same caliber 46E40 that was always in the watch. Pretty much all of Orient's mechanical automatic watches feature 46 series movements, which are based on the old Seiko 7000 series movements. I think specifically the 7006. My old Seiko 5 has a 7009 caliber movement in it. That is the direct ancestor of the current Seiko 7S26 movement, which is inside today's Seiko 5s. So the movement in this watch shares a lot of DNA with the movements inside modern Seiko 5 watches. So anyway, I've probably gotten way too far off in the weeds. Let's go over to the tabletop and take a closer look at this watch. I've had about a month to wear it and use it, and I think it's pretty nice. So let's go take a look. All right, guys, so here is the Orient President. And the first thing you will notice about it is that it is a blatant homage to the Rolex President. We've got our day window up at the top of the dial here with a date under a cyclops over here, the fluted bezel ring, the Jubilee bracelet, the same sort of rounded case sides that you would find on a Rolex. It's not a clone, it's not a counterfeit, but it's pretty darn close. So let's get the specifics out of the way right away. The case diameter is 37 millimeters. The lug to lug length is 44 millimeters, and it has a really nice standard 20 millimeter lug width. So it'll be fairly easy to find aftermarket straps and bracelets. Can't imagine why you'd really want to replace the bracelet on this watch. It's one of the nicer reproductions I've seen of a sort of early style Jubilee bracelet. The links are all solid half round barrel type links. It adjusts with little push pins, so no fancy screws or anything like that, but it's overall very, very solid. It doesn't rattle particularly much. So-called hollow end links, they're actually not hollow end links because these center links are the end links. Those are that which the spring bar passes through, but it does have folded stainless steel shrouds on the end of the bracelet, just like an early Rolex would do. So it's overall a really nice looking watch. You can see from looking at it, the finish, the machining, everything is just about perfect. No ugly smearing where the polishing was done on the sides or anything like that. Now, this is not a cheap watch. I think Orient's getting about $400 for this watch nowadays, which is right up there with some of the Seiko Sarb watches and some mid-range Swiss watches. So it's definitely not cheap, but it's also definitely nicely done. The clasp is just folded sheet metal. It locks down over a little stud here with dual release catches. You've got the Orient logo embossed into the clasp there. The case back is a screw down oyster type case back. It's funny, it has the little Rolex fluting around the edge here, but of course it's meant to be removed with a standard case back wrench because it's got the cutouts for that. You can see on the case back it's just acid etched or maybe laser engraved with the Orient logo, and you can see it was made in Japan. This is not a watch that's with a Japanese movement cased up in China or something. Orient is, as Japanese watchmakers go, pretty much the watchmaker's watchmaker. The parts and everything that go into the movement are made on an automated line, but unlike Seiko and Citizen and even some high-end Swiss brands like Rolex, assembly is not automated. These watch movements are made by hand, are assembled by hand. There's some interesting videos on probably here on whatever platform you're watching this video on. Certainly on YouTube, you can find a few videos that were posted by Orient that show their factory and show their production process in Japan. And each movement is hand assembled by Japanese skilled watchmakers in blue lab coats and caps in a clean room. Orient really does continue to manufacture watches in the old style. This does feature the Orient caliber 46E40. It's a pretty basic movement. It's auto winding only, no hand winding, no hacking. But it's a good, solid movement that's related closely to the Seiko 7000 series. I think the 46E40 was based on the Seiko 7006, unlike the Seiko 7009 that's in my Seiko 5. This features push-button day changes, whereas with the Orient 46E40, you've got to scroll through the days, so you may have to roll forward a week to get the day correct in the window, but it does have quick setting for the date then. The crystal and the Cyclops are in fact sapphire. I've been wearing the watch a little bit. It wears very nicely, and I haven't gotten any scratches yet. These Cyclops magnifiers are famous on glass crystals for getting scratched almost immediately because they stick up quite a bit from everything else on the front of the watch and are the first things to want to tend to hit door frames and cinder block walls and such. And this one hasn't gotten scratched up at all yet, and I've had it a little over a month and I've worn it quite a bit. The clasp is starting to acquire some scratches, light surface scratches, but nothing too terrible. I don't really worry about scratching up my watches. I buy watches to wear and not to keep in a safe and look at. Overall, it's been keeping fairly good time, and I'm quite impressed with the watch. A lot of people don't like these faux diamond indices. Now, I don't know what these crystals are that are on the indices. They're clearly not diamonds. Now, the watch says sapphire on the dial, and that, of course, is referring to the sapphire crystal. Perhaps the indices are made of synthetic sapphire. That would make sense. But whatever they're made of, they do catch the light quite nicely. It's hard to see it in here. I'll try to work in an outdoor shot in some sunshine. Some Orient watches that have crystal indices on the dials are identified on Orient's website as being Swarovski crystal. So that may be the case as well. They could be Swarovski crystal. They could be synthetic sapphire. Highly unlikely that they're diamond. But one of the things that the diamond indices have kind of forced Orient to do in making this watch was shortening the handset. The indices stick up rather high, and so in order to keep the minute hand in particular and the second hand from clashing with the indices, they've had to shorten them considerably. And if there's one real styling problem to this watch, it is the very short hands. They don't bother me, but they've really put some people off of this watch altogether. But it hasn't really hurt sales too much in general because the watch is quite popular, particularly in Asia. Another fact with a watch like this, it's a dress watch, it's not a sport watch, and there is no lume. There's no lume on the hands, there's no lume on the dial. When it's dark, the watch dial is dark. If you're in the pitch black, you're not going to be able to read the time. One of the problems I've noticed with the watch, and it's not a huge problem, but it is something to take into consideration. If you get the black dial, under certain lighting situations, you can see the hands nearly disappear. For instance, like that. And this seems to be especially prevalent with the lighting conditions, even during daytime when you're driving a car. The angle of the light coming in the car windows, I have found that it can be very difficult to read the time on this dial while driving a car. Now, of course, I have a clock on my dashboard, so it's not a huge issue, but it is something to take into account. Under certain lighting conditions, these shiny hands, as you can see right here, can simply disappear into the black dial. Most of the time, if you just adjust your angle, you can quickly pick up the hands. One thing I'm sure you've noticed already at this point is there's quite a bit of glare off of the crystal. This is a sapphire crystal. Sapphire has a higher refractive index than glass, which makes it more reflective. And unlike a lot of expensive watches with sapphire crystals, the Orient President doesn't have any anti-reflective coating. So there is a bit of a glare there, and again, you're going to have to sort of adjust your angle of view to be able to view the hands just so. And it can be hard to get the proper reflection off of the hands without getting the annoying reflection off the crystal. So if I had to point my finger at any one thing about this watch and say I don't like that, it is a matter of legibility. But most of the time I can figure out what time it is by looking at the watch. And I like the way the watch looks. It's very nicely styled, as would be imagined. It's a very blatant, once again, homage to the Rolex President, which is by far probably the most iconic and still to this day one of the most expensive and exclusive models from Rolex. And there's not a lot of, there have been a lot of companies that have made watches that pay homage to the Rolex President, but nobody has done it quite as well as Orient, I think, with this watch. Don't really know what else to say about the watch so far. It's been wearing very well, and it wears very nicely. It is rather small by today's standards. I haven't gotten any comments on this watch so far, but I've only had it about a month. It's winter time. I've been wearing it with long sleeves. I am anticipating getting quite a few comments about the watch once summertime rolls around and I wear this with short sleeves, because there's just no way you can see this thing from more than a couple of feet away and not confuse it with a Rolex day date. So you're probably going to get comments if you buy this watch. But I don't have a problem with that, and I think it holds its own very nicely. It does feature 100 meters of water resistance. It does have a screw-down crown, which is screwed down right now. And so far, I have accidentally worn this in the shower at least once. I've worn it while doing the dishes a few times, and I've had no water intrusion into the case. As might be expected, I wouldn't go scuba diving with the watch, although I imagine you could go swimming in a swimming pool or some light swimming at the beach wearing the watch. So, all in all, I'm pretty impressed. I don't want to drag this out too long, so let's go back over to the bookshelves and wrap this video up. So, all in all, I really, really like the Orient President. I think it's a really cool watch. If you're the kind of person who hates clones or homages or whatever, you may end up hating this watch. If you're the kind of person who doesn't like sort of flashy design elements and you don't like the diamond indices, you're liable to hate this watch. But I think it's very understandable, especially considering the enormous price tag of the Rolex day date nowadays, why this is such a popular watch worldwide. I can, again, kind of understand why Orient isn't really thrilled with the watch, or they don't highlight it very much on any of their corporate websites. But people really like it, and I think as long as people continue to buy it in large numbers, Orient is certainly going to continue to produce it. Now, it's not available domestically in the United States, as far as I know. Maybe some specialty retailers like Island Watch or something like that might sell it, but for the most part, you've got to buy it internationally. You can buy it certainly on eBay. I got mine, or I guess I should say more accurately, my dad was nice enough to get it for me for Christmas through Amazon, but it was shipped from Asia. It did take a few weeks to get here. I think the biggest question about this watch that I have yet to address is the price. This watch is not cheap. It does feature a very solid movement, but it is just a 17 jewel automatic wind only movement. It doesn't hack. It doesn't hand wind. So it's a fairly simple, it's very robust, very workmanlike. It's reasonably accurate, and it'll probably run for a very long time, but it's not a very sophisticated movement. It does feature sapphire crystal, all stainless steel construction. It has a screw down crown. It's 100 meters water resistant. It is beautifully finished. But at $400, it's not cheap, or right around $400. At that same price point, you're looking at other watches from Japan, like the Seiko Sarb series, which feature a more sophisticated movement, a higher level of fit and finish. I mean, this is very good. But the Seiko Sarbs are kind of verging on Grand Seiko, or baby, they're sometimes referred to as baby Grand Seikos. They're verging on that sort of level of fit and finish. And they've got slightly more original styling. It's not so heavily derivative of Rolex styling, for instance. And they're generally considered to be a higher grade product by a lot of enthusiasts. And they're just about the same price as this watch. I prefer this because it suits my sort of sense of style. Not a big fan of the Seiko Sarb series personally, although I do think they are excellent, excellent watches. And probably present a better value when you consider what you're getting. I prefer this watch. If you would, and you really, really want it, I would say go ahead and get it. You're not going to be disappointed with the watch itself as long as you're willing to pay that kind of money. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider liking, subscribing, sharing, telling your friends, all that jazz. I really appreciate all of those. Give me a thumbs up if you liked it. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And when I post new content to the channel, I hope to see each of you here then. Later, guys.